Welcome to the Configuration Management Workshop. So in this workshop, we will be extending the ideas that we started with when we use virtual environments to be able to run code and isolate ourselves from, say, our host computer. Um, what we're going to be exploring is this idea of, well, how is it we set up more advanced infrastructure for being able to start to automate that process of installing things on other computers and being able to even access them. And it turns out a considerable part of this workshop is just digging into the lower level mechanisms you need for being able to allow one computer to connect to another. And usually this is kind of done for us, but what I thought would be interesting is to focus on how is it you would do this by hand so that you can understand a little better of why these things or how these things often go wrong. So what we will start with doing on this page is setting up the virtual machines that we need to work with, and then we will go into the next part of the workshop. And while you're here, you'll also want to make sure that you have already done this step, if you haven't, which is to install the latest preview version of Dockable. And that's important because in that version, it supports this idea of multi-targets, which means that we can run a command or have a terminal running in a different environment. Okay, so for the first part, we're just going to do something real simple. We're just going to run these two commands for creating a virtual machine. And then we're going to just do a real quick check just to see if that all worked. And I also want to point out two interesting things about the first machine that we created, which we're going to call the config server. So in the config server, you'll notice that there is this flag for passing in an IP address and the sync flag. So for the first flag, you'll notice that we have created essentially a host-only network that's assigned a static IP address. So what that means is from our host computer, we will be able to ping that server, right? And that will be useful later on where you want to write scripts that identify specific um, computers by their IP address. The second is the sync operator that will essentially create a shared directory in the virtual machine. And that's very similar to the volume that we used in Docker, where you were able to share one directory and make it available in another environment. So we'll also check that out. So the easiest way to see all this stuff is just, from your terminal, be able to say, okay, can I actually reach those two virtual machines? So the first one is going to be at this address, and it looks like that's all okay. I'm going to try this other one. See, that one's okay. All right, so it looks like both of my virtual machines are alive and well, and they have IP addresses I could reach. So that's cool. But let's actually try to get into one of them. Okay, so I'm inside one of these virtual machines, and I could do a couple things, just like mainly check its IP address just to make sure. And you could see, yes, look, see this is the first NIC that has just that private NAT network, and then this is the second NIC that has the static IP address that's assigned to it. All right, so so that kind of shows, oh yeah, and then the other thing I want to show you is if I do ls on Baker X, then you can see the files that are part of this workshop are actually accessible from this VM, which are useful for later on in the workshop. Okay, so that's it for this step. You'll want to double check all this works okay before moving on to the next stage.